Hello, everyone. Welcome to Breaking the Stigma with Rocco Spear. Today's guest is Maria Berardi, and we will be talking about love, grief, and suicide. Hi, Maria.
Hi, Rocco.
So, would you like to give us a little bit of a background on what you're here to speak about today?
Yeah, it's some pretty deep subjects, isn't it?
Yeah.
Love, that in itself is a deep one. Grief, which has hit my life hard and many times, and mental health, suicide. Those are all really important subjects. So hopefully I can touch a little bit on each one of them for you today.
Yeah. So, to start off with love, how did you and your first husband, Tom, meet? And what did love mean to you then?
So I was very young. I will start that off by saying I was actually 15 when I met him. And I was 18 when we got married. We actually met in church. So it started off with a good beginning, right? And we were in a folk group together. So yeah, I was very young and wasn't allowed to date him till I was 16. And we ended up getting married when I was 18 and he was 21.
Wow. So, how long were you guys married for?
16 years.
Wow. What was it like navigating the end of your guys' marriage?
So it was hard. It was extremely hard because it wasn't a quote normal divorce, a normal situation. I had a lot to deal with. I had 3 young children, 12, 10, and 8. So they were very young, and trying to navigate through all that made it very complex and very hard, especially in the 90s.
Yeah. So, how did that change your definition of love and trust?
Well, again, I guess I have to go into a little bit of detail as to how we got divorced, right, or why. I found out after 16 years of marriage that my husband was gay. So you have so many emotions and feelings that go with that. And so trying to navigate through that, to be honest with you, I felt like a blind woman trying to walk through the dark and not really knowing what was going to be around the corner. I mean, there were no rule books. There were no
guidelines. Here's how to do it the right way.
Right. And in the 90s, this was not something that was nearly talked about or as common as it is now. So it was really difficult to deal with.
So did you feel pressure to move on quickly after that?
No. And I'll tell you why. Because you couldn't move on. I had to move through. My focus was on my kids, and that was really hard. The most difficult part about that, Rocco, was because there was no one to talk with about this. Coming out in the 90s was not a popular thing. And being a spouse of someone who comes out in the 90s was even less of a popular thing. And people just wouldn't talk to me about it. And I was very alone in that. And so that is one of the reasons why I'm so thrilled that you're talking about these really difficult subjects, because there's nothing fun about this subject, but it's important.
Mm-hmm.
And it's important that we start talking about it. It's important that we step outside of our comfort zone and help people through that, because when I tell you I was alone walking through that, I was alone. And so I don't want anybody to experience that. And so I'm glad that you're doing this. It's very important, and it should be talked about.
So in what ways, through your experiences, have you helped other people navigate what they're going through and helping them?
So it's interesting. When I went through this in the 90s, I shocked doesn't even begin to describe it, right? And I didn't know where to begin. Where do I go for help? Who do I talk to? And so I had to kind of count on myself to get some information in how to help get through this horrible time. And in doing so, I discovered something really interesting, and that is then 1.5 million marriages had one spouse who was dealing with homosexuality. And I thought to myself, there's no way. Because I felt like I was the only person in the world going through it.
Secluded from like everybody else.
And if that was in the 90s, can you imagine what that is now?
Yeah.
And so when I discovered that, I realized that, wow, I'm not alone in this, but where are all these people? Where are they, right? Because nobody was talking about it. It's not a subject that the church talks about. It's not a subject that friends talk about. It's not a subject that people felt comfortable in approaching you and discussing. So felt very isolated through that. The navigating was hard. You had to dig deep and really try and make sense of something that made no sense to me.
So what did falling in love look like for you the second time?
It felt like a big surprise. Number one, I had no intention of falling in love again. I think you put your guard up. It's really hard to trust after something like that happens to you. And again, just really focusing on my children who were still young. And I was really fortunate when I met my second husband, Raj, who was from India. And it started as a friendship, which was the best way to start it. And it was a little over 4 years after my divorce, which is a really important thing because when you go through something like that, it is so easy to rebound and so easy to want to fall into other relationships. And I'm thankful that I didn't allow that to happen, that I gave myself enough time to heal. And so it started out slow. It was a friendship, and we fell deeply in love.
So when you found out about Raj's death, what went through your mind when it happened, when you experienced that?
So here's something I learned about grief, and that is that there's all kinds of grief, right? I had very complicated grief, not once, not twice, but 3 times in my life. When Rajan died, he was in India, and so that made it very complicated. First off, it didn't feel real, and you're talking to him one moment, and the next moment he's no longer here. We had a dear friend of the family call me. It actually, Rocco, was really crazy because I had a very disturbed sleep, and I woke up at 4 a.m. and just felt something, and I didn't know what that something was. And an hour and a half later, I got the phone call that my husband had passed away.
Wow. So you spiritually felt it and then not shrugged it off, but just kind of knew that something was up.
Something was not right. The even crazier thing about that was that morning, it was Super Bowl Sunday, and there was a huge blizzard, and he hated snow. And he had a dog, Tiger, who was his love. And Tiger, when I got up that morning, was laying on the floor ill. And believe it or not, his dog died the same day. And it was as if that dog knew. So there was definitely a spiritual connection with Raj, which didn't make a lot of sense to me at the time. It does now. So him being in India in a whole different country added so much more difficulty to dealing with his death. Just the logistics of even trying to get him home was hard.
Yeah.
And it made it very, very unreal. It was hard to grasp with him being in India.
So with him being in India, how do you think your grieving would have looked different if he would have died in the States rather than in another country?
It made it hard, Rocco, because I couldn't grasp it. You know, I knew he was going to be away for a few weeks. He had family in India, and he was handling some family situations. His death was very tragic, and so that certainly made it that much harder. But also, um, he wasn't here for me to visibly see that he had passed, and so it just didn't seem real. You know, if someone you love passes away, you know, you see a body, or you go to the funeral home, or you have to do all those horrible things that go with it, and none of that was happening because he wasn't here. So that added a lot of complexity to the situation.
So, how did being apart from Raj affect how you grieved?
Um, it was hard for it to be a reality for me with him being gone. You know, when something like that happens, the first thing you want to do is run to the situation. And I couldn't do that. I mean, I was ready to get on a plane and fly to India. Thankfully, I had a lot of smart people around me who wouldn't allow that to happen, because that wouldn't have been a good situation. And so that made it really hard. But initially, the first week to 10 days, we were just focused on trying to bring his body home. And that wasn't easy. It's not easy when someone dies in another country.
Mm-hmm.
And in India, it was even more complex, because we were dealing with another culture, we were dealing with another religion, and how they handle everything. My husband was Christian, and it was something he held very dear to him, something he believed in, and that was part of the mission that he was in India for. And his family was Hindu, so they wanted to immediately have a Hindu service, which meant, I mean, I don't know how else to say this, but they actually cremate the body within 24 hours. And so I had all of this horrible things that I had to deal with and try to stop, right, from a phone. And boy, it was hard.
Yeah. Wow. So what helped you in the following weeks grieve his loss?
Boy, my faith. I mean, I have to be honest with you. When people ask me that question, like, how do you go through what you went through? There is no other answer but my faith. And it is what sustained me, and it is what made sense to me, because nothing else did during that time. So I was fortunate that I had so many people that loved him and loved me, that surrounded me and supported me, prayed for us, you know, just was there helping. And I don't know what I would have done without those people. You know, I think within an hour and a half of learning of Rajan's death, there was probably 75 people in my home, and all of them had a different relationship with him, and you just really lean in on people when something like that happens. And I was fortunate that I had a lot of people who loved Raj, because he was so lovable.
So how did grief counseling help you in your journey?
So I think that a lot of times, Rocco, people go through horrible times in their life, and they are like, I'm good, I'm all right, I can get through this.
They suppress everything.
Sure. You know, you just don't really realize how much you have to deal with. And so for me, that was certainly the case. You know, you have to be really careful when you go through this kind of grief, the loss of somebody. Everybody will say dumb things. I mean, they really will. And if I have learned anything through my grief, it's what not to say to somebody when you go through something like that. And I never really got the permission from people to be weak. Everybody would say, oh, you're so strong. Your faith is so strong. And I'd like to think that I am a strong woman, and I do have strong faith, but I also needed permission to be weak. And it didn't mean that I could handle the world. And so that was a difficult journey for me. And so I realized early on, boy, I need to talk to somebody about this. And it's interesting because when I went to the counselor for the first time, the first thing she said to me was, we're going to dig deep. And
Wow.
yeah, and we're going to, this isn't only just about Raj, but about the loss of your first marriage. And I'm like, no, I'm good. Really, I'm good. And
because I'm sure by then you've like suppressed it so far that you've almost, in a way, forgot about it.
Yeah, and you got to remember, it was not a subject that people are comfortable talking about, and so I didn't talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, even my family members, I have to say, there was really very little support there from most of them. I had a couple that were really supportive, but from most of them, it just wasn't discussed. Like, if we don't discuss it, it didn't happen, kind of thing. So counseling dug deep, and it was one of the best things I've ever done for myself.
Wow. So how did your loss shape who you are today and identify your daily life?
Yeah. So I think, love is just a really, it's a broad word, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, my marriage to my first husband, we certainly loved each other. We brought 3 children into the world. But it was a whole different love than what I experienced with Rajan. And it does mold you into a different person, and it does shape you into a different person. You will never be that same person. And I think when you go through that kind of grief, the one thing you tend to do is want to hold on to who you were. And that person's gone. You know, there's a part of me that died with Raj. There's a part of me that died with my first marriage. And so that person is no longer there. So who am I? And that is still a journey. And I've learned a lot about myself and things I didn't even know about myself as I went through that. But love, I will tell you this, it sounds like such a cliche, but it really doesn't die. You know, there's that love, but then there's also that spiritual love and that bond that you have that is forever in your heart. And that is with me to this day.
Wow, that's really powerful.
Yeah.
What you said about a piece of yourself dying along with them. I think a lot of people can relate to what you just said. Maybe not the same way that you experienced it, but in everybody's own ways. So when you do think of your past marriages, how do you take care of yourself when old memories may resurface or remind you of your past marriages?
So, one of the things I think we are most comfortable about when it comes to emotions and feelings is sadness, right? We're just not comfortable with it. And so we tend to avoid it. In this line of work, we're sitting in a massage therapy office, and I work closely with people, and I've gotten very close to my clients over the 30 years that I've been doing this. And it was strange. After Rajan died, some of my clients would call and say, I can't come in because if I see you, I'm just going to cry. And I'd be like, okay, well, then we're going to cry. And instead of trying to avoid all those emotions and feelings, and that's exactly what we did. There would be, we would just give each other a hug, and there were many tears. And that is all part of the healing process. If you just pretend it doesn't happen, it only makes it worse.
Mm-hmm. It's almost better to confront them at first, like strike it when it happens,
right,
than just let it like sit and just build up, and then all of a sudden just comes out, and then it's just a big monster.
I had a really dear friend of mine who also had many losses in their life. And, you gain so much wisdom from people who have been on this journey. And I will never forget what he said. He lost his son at the age of 21, and he said, I will tell you right now, people will say really stupid things to you because
I
they
can
don't.
only imagine.
Yeah, because they don't know what to say, and I thought that was such an odd statement at the time,
Mm-hmm.
but it did not take me long to understand exactly what he meant, and they do. Oh, they're in a better place, or Jesus must have wanted them more than you, or, well, you're such a strong woman, you're going to get through this. Like, don't say those things to people who are really in deep grief. And I know that their intentions are good. Or don't avoid talking about the person. That's another part of it. I love talking about Raj. He was a big part of my life. And I'm fortunate, Rocco, because I'm married to a wonderful man now, and that was a real concern for me. Is I didn't want to forget Raj, and he has blessed me in that, because he has often said, I'm fine with Rajan's picture in our home, and he knows that there's a place in my heart that nobody will ever fill, and that's Rajan's. There's a place in my heart that my husband now will never fill, or anybody else will fill. It's his place, right? And so there's lots of heart spaces for people. And when you find somebody that is secure enough that allows you to still love that person, there's something really special about that.
So, you have experienced two types of grief, to our knowledge so far. How have there been any connections between your grief between both your marriages?
They were both major losses, right? I mean, look, I was that girl that walked down the aisle and thought that I would be married forever and ever and ever. And we all have dreams and hopes, and that didn't happen. And it took me a long time to work through that betrayal and that broken trust. But I need to say this because it's important. I don't want to peg him as a bad man, because he wasn't. He's a great man. He's a father of my children. I still love him. It's a whole different love, and it is something I've had to work really hard at. And him being gay, that's between him and God, and I had to come to terms with that. But it doesn't change the fact that it broke my marriage, and that now I have a broken family, and that wasn't certainly what I thought my life would end up being. So that was a whole different kind of grief, right? And someday maybe we'll talk about how Rajan died, but I can just say that it was very tragic. And so you had that complexity from that kind of grief. There were a lot of similarities and so many things different.
So how has your views on grief shifted over time, some years later after the death and the divorce?
I'm not afraid of it anymore. I'm not afraid to talk about it. I think that grief is something that is so uncomfortable for people to talk about. And again, I'm talking about, church life and family life and friendships and all of that. People are just really afraid to talk about grief. And I have a friend who lost a husband recently, and one of the things she said to me was, please tell me I'm going to survive this. And my words were, yeah, you will. But boy, it's going to be tough. And you have to be willing to go through this. It's a process. And just talking about it and not making people feel so uncomfortable about whatever their feeling is, whether that is anger or sadness or disbelief or whatever it is. They say that there's 5 stages of grief. I think there's so many more than that.
Oh, I totally agree.
Yeah.
There's almost 5 main stages,
Yeah.
but everybody goes through their own in their own different ways.
Yeah.
Kind of like a like a different aspect to each stage, like a sub-stage.
Right.
So you faced multiple unimaginable challenges, and one of the most recent ones being the suicide of your son. What was it like when you first learned about your son's passing, and what was that moment like?
It's a moment that I would wish on no one. So Kevin is my son that ended his life, and he was 33 years old. Again, Kevin was he was a challenge from utero. I mean, he was born in just a mother knows, right? And I knew there was something, but I didn't know what the something was.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't like to be touched. He'd kind of pull away. Babies love to be snuggled.
Yeah.
He cried for 3 months. He had a few medical issues. It was a difficult upbringing, and that only made me love him more, right? But when you deal with somebody, Rocco, who has mental illness, or my son suffered from depression, and the first thing people would say about Kevin is he was so funny. He was just so funny. Well, so was Robin Williams, right?
Yeah.
And so many other people that I could think of that's a way of covering up that depression and that sadness because we don't talk about it. Again, that's why this is so important. So as a mother, I always knew that there was something. And boy, we had him in doctors and, trying to get him diagnosed and he's ADD. It was so much deeper than that, and especially the last few years of Kevin's life, I started to be more fearful that, boy, this is serious. And I started to see a big change in him. So again, I was out of the country and I was in Australia, and I felt like Kevin was doing better. And call it what you would, I call it the Holy Spirit, but I was just arrived in Australia after a very difficult flight of 30 hours, and I was standing there talking to a friend of mine who, by the way, just invited me there. It was a cousin of Rajan's. It's like, look, you've been under so much stress. Just come get away for a couple weeks. And something told me to go to my phone. And ironically, there are so many similarities to this because Rajan was out of the country. I was out of the country when Kevin died. And both times were 4 a.m. And
wow.
And I went to my phone, and Kevin had posted a goodbye to the world on Facebook, and I was the first to see it. And when I say it was the very second that he posted it, was the very second. Being that far away and reading this was one of the scariest, darkest, deepest moments of my life. And as a mother, you just want to run to your child, right? You just want to run and protect them and help them. And I started making some frantic phone calls, like get to him. And it was just so surreal, Rocco, that I can't even put that into words. But being that far away was the most helpless feeling I've ever had in my life.
Wow. So you talked about both deaths being at 4 a.m. So with your religion and spiritually, how did those experiences kind of guide you in a way or connect you?
Again, it's going to sound like words. We hear it all the time, but how people navigate through life without God is beyond me. I can't even imagine. I know where Kevin is, and I know that this is a temporary situation, being apart from him. I know where Rajan is. I know where my mother is, my father is, my 2 sisters are. I have a good friend that passed. I've lost a lot of people, as many people have. But there is a peace that comes with this, because it's a knowing that they're in heaven. We are separated only temporarily, and that is what carried me through. And boy, it takes a big, deep trust in God and your faith. Faith is a real easy thing to hold on to till you're going through those dark times. And then faith has to simply become trust. And I had to trust that I was going to get through this. And I wouldn't be here without that faith. I can tell you that right now.
So, how do you balance everyday things with your emotions that you faced in the days following the incident?
You don't always balance them, Rocco, if I'm going to be honest. You know, there is such a brokenness from that kind of loss that, and here's the thing, we have to get comfortable in saying the word suicide because people just won't talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
So now
it's very taboo.
It's
like
very
in society.
taboo. So is homosexuality, right? I mean, and so it wasn't discussed in church by no means. It certainly isn't discussed by friends. No, it's far different now. But suicide and mental health, I know you and I have had a couple conversations on this, and I'm so grateful that people are talking about this. We have to get comfortable with it, right? My son died by suicide, and that isn't an easy thing to say. But the reality of it is, until we start talking about the whys and the hows, and we're never going to be able to help each other navigate through this if we don't. I remember after Kevin died, I was asked to speak in a church event, and it was my first Mother's Day without Kevin, and boy, it was hard. And I hesitated, but I felt the importance of it, and so I did. And it's one of those things, like, I don't really know how I got through that, but I did. And afterwards, I was blown away. There was a line of people that wanted to talk to me. And the reason they wanted to talk to me is because they too were experiencing some form of mental health or someone in their family. And so many people would say, please don't tell anybody but my husband or my brother or my son. And I walked away so sad from that. I'm like, why are we doing this to each other? Like, what is it that we are finding it so hard to discuss? Like, there's such a stigma with mental health. And, you know, I was reading the statistic and I'm like, holy moly, this is crazy. 33% of high school kids, young adults in Ohio deal with mental health. That is 1 in 3 people. And so, you know, you think about that when you walk down the hallway in your high school, 1 in 3 people, right?
That's a lot. Like
it's
when you visualize it, that's like a school with 50 kids. That's like an entire classroom size of people.
Exactly. And so, you know, when you put that in perspective, Rocco, and you start to think about that, don't you think it's something we need to start talking about, right?
100%.
Yeah.
So when you hear people say like, oh, I hate my life, I want to kill myself, I don't want to do it any longer, how do you deal with that? And what's your reaction to when people say that?
So remember when I told you, like, you learn exactly what not to say?
Mm-hmm.
And I would just maybe help people to understand this part. Be really, really careful with your words, right? I mean, we're all so different. And when you see people, especially in high school, man, it is, I can't imagine how hard it is right now to be a teenager and in this world and trying to navigate through all that we have to navigate. But when we say things like, oh, he's crazy, or geez, I'd rather you put a gun to my head than make me do this, or geez, I could just kill myself. You know, really watch those words. Words have power, and when you go through what I've gone through and what other people have gone through, and that kind of a trauma, those words are very, they're strong, and when there are people who are in such a fragile state, maybe one of the reasons why they wouldn't talk to you is because they don't want you to think that they're crazy.
Mm-hmm.
You know, which is again, that's a sad thing, isn't it? That people would feel that way. I just wish people would be more sensitive to it, Rocco. Like, look, we're all got something.
Everybody deals with something.
It's something. And we all just want to walk around and feel like we're okay and quote normal. And who's normal? Right? I mean, who's normal? If I've learned anything, it's like, who's normal?
Yeah.
Define it. Show me. I was just recently at a women's conference, and it was a powerful moment because one of the speakers had everybody close their eyes, and she was asking the question, have you ever been here in your life where you've dealt with divorce or separation or addiction in your family or mental health issues? And she just kept going on and on and on. She said, with your eyes closed, I want you to just raise your hand if you've ever had to deal with any of those things. And Rocco, there were thousands of people at this event. When we opened our eyes, there was not one hand down, which means that we're all dealing with something. And until we start getting real, I believe that my story matters. I believe that your story matters. I believe everybody's story matters. And I want them to know that it matters. And I want them to know that they're not alone. I want them to know that the death of a spouse or dealing with homosexuality or, God forbid, suicide, you're not alone. And I think people get comfort in knowing that. And it's important that we just continue that conversation.
So you said that your son Kevin dealt with depression.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any warning signs that you noticed following his death that you look back on and was like, that could have been an indicator that, like, I should have known, how did I not know?
So yes, but see, I did know. And I don't know what is worse. I know I have good friends who have lost their children to suicide. And one of the things they say all the time is like, if only I knew. And my response to that is, and what difference would that have made? Because I knew. And so, I remember having a conversation with my daughter Rachel, and it's ironic. I have two, my daughter and my daughter-in-law are both mental health professionals. And they deal with this on a daily basis, right? They're out there helping people and changing lives every day, and they're both wonderful therapists. And I remember me calling my daughter in just desperation, like just in total panic. And it was about actually 6 months before Kevin took his life. And I said, I'm terrified. I think he's going to do something, and I don't know what to do. And she said, Mom, as hard as this is, there's nothing you can do. And at first I thought that was such a harsh statement, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the reality of it is, Rocco, that you can't stop somebody. And boy, that is a hard reality. But also, I hope that it takes the pressure off of all the parents out there whose child did take their life, and they say, if only I knew. I don't think it would have made a difference. So, I had a lot of warning signs with Kevin. And I remember the day, as a parent, I kind of describe it as having your child on a ledge of a 50-story building, and they're going to jump. And, I'm with the safety net, and I'm just running like crazy trying to catch him and save him till I was purely exhausted. And I look back at that now, and it's like, we really can't. And so, boy, that's hard. That's a hard reality. But hopefully by me saying that, also it takes the guilt and the pressure off all these parents out there who think that they really could have done something to stop it. We always have that if only, right? Mm-hmm. If only I didn't send my husband to India. If only I was home and not in Australia when Kevin did this. If only somebody would have had a conversation. If only, you can go crazy. You can make yourself crazy with those questions.
Yeah. So you talked about your daughter and your daughter-in-law. How did Kevin's suicide affect them? How did it affect his loved ones?
Yeah. So, boy, that was hard, especially with them being in the field of mental health. I know that in having some discussions, one of the things they said was, actually, I will be honest with you. I had a really, really cruel comment from somebody. And boy, Mama Bear came out real fast when somebody said, well, your daughter's in mental health, she couldn't save them. And yeah, and those are some of the horrible things that people say.
Who would have the audacity to say that to somebody?
Evil people.
That's terrible.
And people who have no idea the emotions and the depth of that kind of loss, right?
You're going through a loss for the third time, and they're essentially telling you, like, suck it up, you should have known.
Yeah.
That's terrible.
Yeah. But you gotta forgive them for their ignorance, right? It's just pure ignorance.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember having a conversation with my daughter after my son died. It was actually at the funeral. And I'm like, you need to keep doing what you're doing because you're changing lives. And I think they are changing lives, right? And so if we start trying to control how people die and when they die, or we think that we can, boy, we're giving ourselves way too much power, right? We're not Superman. We just can't do that. I wish we could, but we can't.
Mm-hmm.
And that took me a while to realize that.
So what kind of help was most supportive during that time?
I'm just going to be real with you again, Rocco, and tell you that the only thing that is more difficult than talking about homosexuality in a marriage is suicide. And so people are so uncomfortable in talking about it. What helps me is people talking about him, who he was, sharing stories, trying to remember all the happy memories. What is hardest, Rocco, is people ignoring it. If you die of a natural cause or a horrible accident or a disease, people are more apt to say, doggone that cancer, or, boy, that was a horrible accident. But suicide, they just won't even acknowledge it. And so I am on a mission in my life to talk about it. I am comfortable talking about it now. I don't like it. It's not a subject that makes me happy, mm-hmm. but I don't want anybody to go through what I went through. And I often do think that my son Kevin might still be here if we made mental health a little bit more comfortable for people who are dealing with it to talk about.
So how has your views on mental health shifted since the incident?
I'm aware of how many people struggle. I embrace it differently. I try to encourage people who are going through it. There's so many different kinds of mental health, right? But we're all struggling again with something. We all are. And just helping people to know that they're loved and that people care, that they're not alone in this. You have my permission. Give my phone number to anybody who feels like, look, I'm going through this really hard time. If it's a parent whose child is dealing with the same things that my child did, just don't hide your head in shame. You're not alone in that. And I wish that I would have realized it at the time because I felt alone.
So how do you now, after these various types of griefs happen to you, how do you define healing for yourself now?
It's a process. So I have been divorced for a very long time, and I still deal with emotions with that. You still have that impact from that divorce and from that broken family and from all the emotions that go with that. Rajan will be gone now 12 years, and I still grieve him, and I grieve him differently. And my son Kevin, it will be 10 years in August that he's been gone. And in many ways, Rocco, it feels like yesterday. And in other ways, it feels like it's been a whole lifetime ago. So, you know, that healing, it's going to be something I deal with for the rest of my life. I only know this, that when I went through this kind of loss that I had in these stages of grief, and complex grief, it wasn't just grief. With each one of them was so complex that I had the desire to heal. And again, you know, my faith told me that I would. And so you have to have the desire. Otherwise, you can get so caught up in the brokenness and the pain of what you're feeling that you can feel really hopeless through that situation.
So what ways have you found love again following this?
So again, you know, I feel like love is something that, I mean, there's so many different kinds of love, but, you know, after my divorce, I said, I'll never marry again, you know, and then of course I found Rajan, and I loved him deeply, and we had a beautiful marriage. And then for sure, I was never going to love again. And I'm glad that I didn't stay in that space, because we all need to be loved and love. And so I was lucky enough to find a man who is so different than Rajan. And I mean, they couldn't be farther apart, but to have that experience, that love again, and to understand that some of my friends who have lost a spouse will say, oh, there's no way I'm ever going to love again. No way. I will
They're
never
adamant
ever.
on
Yeah.
it. They're like right there.
And I don't say it, but I think, okay, we'll watch this, right? Because you feel like you have to have this allegiance to your spouse,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like I couldn't do that to them.
Yeah.
But,
like your duty to forever
correct.
be married to them.
And then you realize, you know, like your heart, I just kind of think of my heart with all these spaces in it, and each one holds a special place for these people in my life. And I'm fortunate that I can allow that to happen again.
So how have your experiences shaped the way that you talk about hope?
So I keep this little plaque on my bathroom counter, and it says there's no place like hope. And I love that, right? Because there is no place like hope. Hope is what I think the basic emotion and reason to keep on living. Hope, you know. And so I am thankful that I have never lost that hope. I am really thankful for that. And again, that comes from, I know I talk about God a lot, but I can't not, because it's what has sustained me, and that's where my hope comes from. And so, you know, people who are going through this, Rocco, even in high school, man, I would encourage them to get involved in a church group, get involved, call a pastor, you know, because I think a lot of this mental health that we're dealing with, it's because we're walking around hopeless, right? And because we feel so alone. And I think there is so much confusion out there right now with people in so many areas of their life. And we just need to hang on to that, because it's the only thing at the end that's going to really sustain you. And so, yeah, I look at that every single day, and there is no place like hope, right? I mean, where would we be without that?
What kind of message would you like to give to people regarding love, grief, and suicide?
We're all going to experience, hopefully we all have experienced love, right? With love comes loss. And with loss comes grief. And boy, grief is a big word, and I don't know how we can avoid it, because the last I looked, there's 100% guarantee that we're all going to die. So, and those around us will, and maybe that scares a lot of people. It doesn't scare me, and again, that it doesn't scare me because I know where my hope is, and I just, again, I hope I don't sound like a broken record, but if I were to try and sum up this whole conversation, it'd be that, life is hard, grief is harder, suicide is something that I hope nobody has to go through, but the reality of it is they will. And with suicide, the hardest thing about it is that people choose to leave you, and that is hard to grip. And but we can work through it. We can work through it together. We can use our voices to help each other and become more compassionate. Man, I think we are lacking so much compassion, Rocco. Just we're hard on people. We're just not nice. I mean, that bumper sticker. Just be nice. And just be nice, really. And maybe that's going to be in passing in the hallways in school, and just say, hey, how are you? Or I see you hurting, or if you don't have the words, people say, I hate funerals. Well, who loves funerals, right? But the thing I remember most about the funerals that I have had to be at for my loved ones is are the people that didn't say anything. They would just come up and put their hand on the shoulder or just hold you and cry with you. So it doesn't always have to be words, but it does need to be actions, and we do need to just, have that willingness to reach out to people. So I think that what it has shown me is that I have, and taught me, is that I'm a much more compassionate person and a kinder person. And I'm much more sensitive to people who are hurting than I've ever been before.
Wow. Maria, thank you for being on this episode and sharing your story with all the viewers out there. I'm sure a lot of people will take it to heart and truly think about everything that you said. Once again, thank you.
Thank you, Rocco, for doing this.
Of course.
It's important. It's so important.
Mm-hmm.
So proud of you for that.
Thank you. Thank you for watching Breaking the Stigma, and we'll see you next time.